Every spring, without fail, somebody up on this ridge gets out the sprayer. Maybe you do it too. You walk the edge of the garden, the fence line, the damp patch down by the creek, and you hit everything that looks like a weed. And one little plant in particular catches your eye. It looks like something ancient, jointed green stems, no real leaves to speak of, standing up in rows like tiny pine trees that never quite grew into themselves. It spreads where you don't want it. It comes back no matter what you do to it. And so you spray it or you pull it or you curse it for being stubborn. Up here in these hollers, we've been doing that for 2 or 3 generations now, ever since the chemical companies told us that a tidy garden was a sprayed garden. But the granny women on this ridge, the healers who walked these creek banks 100 years before a single drop of glyphosate was ever mixed in a tank, they would have looked at you sideways for that. They called that little plant one of the most useful things growing wild in the mountains. They kept it dried in bundles above the hearth. They reached for it when a body's joints ached, when the skin was slow to mend, when a woman's hair was thinning or her nails were breaking down to nothing. They knew something about it that we forgot, and what's strange and a little heartbreaking is that modern science is only now, in our own lifetimes, catching up to what those women understood by touch and memory and the passing of knowledge from hand to hand across generations. The plant is horsetail. Its proper name is Equisetum arvense if you want the Latin. And before I go any further, I want to say what I always say. This is the old mountain way, not a doctor's advice. Always do what's right for your own family. What we're talking about here is tradition, what the old women always did, and I'm passing it on the way it was passed to me. Now, to understand why horsetail matters, you have to understand something about collagen first, because that word gets thrown around so much these days that it's lost its meaning. Every drugstore in every town has a whole shelf of collagen powders and capsules, and they're not cheap. But here is something the label won't tell you. Your body cannot absorb collagen from a pill or a powder intact. It cannot. When you swallow a collagen supplement, your digestive system does what it always does with a protein. It breaks it apart into its component pieces, its amino acids, and then it uses those raw materials to build whatever it needs. The collagen you swallowed is gone the moment it hits your stomach. What your body actually needs is not the finished product. It needs the raw ingredients, the building materials to construct its own collagen from the ground up. And that is where those granny women were ahead of their time without ever knowing it. They weren't giving folks the finished product. They were feeding the body what it needed to do the work itself. Collagen is the most abundant protein in the human body. It is the structural scaffolding inside your skin, your joints, your bones, your tendons, the walls of your blood vessels. As we age, the body's ability to produce it slows down. The skin loses its elasticity. The joints grow stiff and tender. The hair thins. The nails go brittle. These are not mysteries. They are the signs of a body that is running low on the raw materials it needs to keep its own framework in repair. What horsetail carries, and this is where it becomes remarkable, is silica. Specifically, bioavailable silica, the kind a body can actually use. According to what researchers have measured, horsetail contains up to 25% silica by dry weight. 25%. That is more than any other known plant on Earth. And silica is not some minor trace element. It is the structural compound your body uses to cross-link collagen fibers, to weave them together the way you'd weave threads in a piece of cloth. So the whole thing holds its shape and bears weight and doesn't tear apart under pressure. A study published in the Archives of Dermatological Research. This is a peer-reviewed medical journal, volume 297. pages 147 through 153, published in 2005, authored by A. Burrell and colleagues including D. van den Berg. That study examined what happened when women with photo-damaged, aging skin took silicone supplementation in a form the body could absorb. It was a randomized, double-blind study, meaning it was done properly, not just wishful thinking. What they found was that oral silicone supplementation measurably improved skin elasticity, skin surface quality, and the brittleness of both hair and nails. Not self-reported feelings, measured improvements. Now, I want you to hold that in your mind because here's what strikes me every time I think about it. Those researchers were working in a laboratory with supplements designed to deliver silicone to the body in a bioavailable form. And the granny women on this ridge were doing the same thing 200 years earlier with a cup of tea. Not because they had read a journal, because they had watched it work. But silica is only part of the story. There is a cofactor in collagen production that almost nobody talks about. And without it, the whole process stalls. Your body builds collagen by taking certain amino acids, proline in particular, and modifying them into a slightly different form called hydroxyproline. Hydroxyproline is what gives a collagen fiber its tensile strength, its ability to flex and recover without snapping. And the enzyme that makes that conversion happen absolutely requires vitamin C to function. Without vitamin C present, the conversion does not happen. Collagen production does not happen. This is not a modern discovery. It is why sailors on long sea voyages died of scurvy, why their gums bled, and their joints dissolved and their wounds would not close. They were dying of collagen failure brought on by vitamin C deficiency. Horsetail contains vitamin C alongside its silica. The granny women, without any knowledge of biochemistry, without any understanding of amino acids or enzymatic reactions, were stacking both of those necessary compounds into a single cup of tea. The supplement industry today sells them to you separately, each bottle priced accordingly. The mountain women made them together for free from a plant growing at the edge of the creek. That is not an accident. That is generations of careful watching. Watching who drank the tea and how they mended. Watching what worked and what didn't. Passing that knowledge forward to daughters and granddaughters and the neighbor women who came when someone was ailing. This is the Appalachian healing tradition, and it runs deeper than most people know. It is not a purely European tradition, and it is not a purely native tradition. It is a blending. The Scots-Irish families who settled these mountains brought their own plant knowledge from the old country. The Cherokee people who had lived on this land for countless generations shared what they knew of its plants. And the African American healers and root workers who were part of these communities from the earliest days brought their own deep tradition of plant medicine. What came out of that mixing over 200 years and more was something that belonged entirely to these mountains. Horsetail itself appears in healing traditions far older and wider than Appalachia. European healers documented it for centuries. It appeared in official medicine books right up through the early 1900s. Chinese medicine used it. Indigenous healers across North America knew it. In the southern Appalachian Mountains specifically, connective tissue was tended with a cluster of plants that the granny women understood to work together. Yarrow for its astringency and its effect on the blood, nettle for its dense store of minerals, comfrey for deep tissue and bone, and horsetail for its silica and its structural building power. These women were working with joints, with skin, with wounds that were slow to close and bruises that spread too wide. They weren't guessing. They were practicing a medicine that had been refined by generations of observation and need. And then, sometime in the early 20th century, that knowledge began to disappear. Not because it stopped working, because something replaced it, more honestly, because something was sold in its place. Now, let me tell you how to find this plant, because knowing it matters. Horsetail grows across almost the whole of temperate North America. It does not need good soil. It does not need you to tend it. It favors the damp and the disturbed places, creek banks, roadsides, the margins of fields, shaded corners where the ground stays moist and the light comes in thin and sideways. If you live anywhere in the Appalachian Mountains, I want you to walk to your nearest creek or shaded bank and look at what's growing there. Look for stems that stand upright and jointed, bright green, maybe 6 to 12 inches tall, with whorls of thin branches coming off each joint. So the whole thing does look remarkably like a miniature pine tree, or maybe like the tail of a horse, which is how it got its name. There are no true flowers and no broad leaves, just those jointed green stems, ancient looking, and they are ancient. Horsetail is one of the oldest plant families on Earth, unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. Once you can recognize it, you will start seeing it everywhere you never noticed it before. Harvesting it the mountain way is simple, and I want to be plain about this. Simple is the whole point. Cut the green summer stems about 2 inches above the soil line. Cut, don't pull. You want to leave the root undisturbed so the plant comes back, which it will do whether you want it to or not. But we want it to now, don't we? Gather what you've cut into loose bunches, not packed tight, and tie them loosely at the base. Hang them or lay them somewhere warm and well ventilated, out of direct sunlight, and let them dry slowly. Direct sun will pull out the color and some of the goodness with it. You want shade and moving air and time. When they're done, and you'll know because the stems will be brittle and pale and smell faintly of dry summer grass, store them somewhere cool and dark in a cloth bag or a glass jar with a loose lid. That is exactly what the granny women did. No equipment, no electricity, no special tools. Patience was the only ingredient they couldn't substitute. Now here's how my granny made it and how I make it still. Take 1 to 2 teaspoons of the dried horsetail and put it in a cup. Pour freshly boiled water over it. Water that has just come off the boil, not water that has been sitting. Cover the cup while it steeps. This matters more than people think. The volatile compounds, the things that are lightest and most active, will escape with the steam if you leave the cup open. A saucer set over the top of the cup is all you need. Let it steep for 15 minutes. The tea will come out mild and faintly earthy, not unpleasant at all. A body could drink it every morning without finding it a hardship. Many mountain women added a small handful of dried nettle to the same cup, and I will tell you there is wisdom in that too. Nettle, the stinging kind, dried until it can't sting anymore, carries iron and magnesium and vitamins A, C, K, and several of the B vitamins all together in one plant. Put horsetail and nettle in the same cup, and you have made what might be the most complete mineral tea the Ridge has to offer. 2 plants, both free, both growing wild, both available to anybody willing to walk down to where the creek runs slow and the ground stays damp. Now, I want to say something about what happened to this knowledge and why you probably never learned it until now. When pharmaceutical companies developed synthetic methods for isolating and replicating certain compounds, including the silicon-based ones that horsetail contains, this plant ceased to be useful to them. You cannot patent a plant that grows wild on every creek bank in North America. You cannot charge a recurring fee for something a body can harvest themselves every summer for as long as they live. So the plant fell out of the official medicine books, and it fell out of the culture, and a generation or two later, it was just a weed. Something the chemical companies were happy to sell you a solution for. The U.S. glyphosate market was estimated at $4.5 billion in 2025. $4.5 billion every year to kill plants that grow on creek banks and roadsides. Some portion of that is people spraying horsetail, a plant that builds itself back every single year, whether you tend it or not. A plant that asks nothing of you but a few minutes and a covered cup. A plant the old women on this ridge knew well and valued deeply and passed down carefully until the passing stopped. That's the grief in it. That's what I carry when I talk about these things. Not just the losing of a remedy, but the losing of a whole way of knowing. The granny women who kept this knowledge were not primitive. They were precise. They were careful. They had learned by watching and by doing across more generations than most of us can count back. And what they knew was ours, mountain peoples, holler peoples. And it is slipping away, but it doesn't have to be gone. That is why I'm here. Before you spray that patch by the creek this spring, I want you to walk down there first and just look. Learn the plant. Learn the joints and the whorls, the ancient look of it, the way it stands up straight in the damp ground like it has been waiting. Because it has been. It's been waiting a good long while for somebody to remember what it is.